Hi, I'm Laura. I am a sprint swimmer from New Zealand who is a big fan of swimming with feel and being quite intuitive with swimming, but I am on a mission to get a little bit more data driven, and I'm very excited to be experimenting with the EO SwimBETTER. This is a sensor that you wear in the pool and it looks at the distribution of power and the movement through the stroke cycle. So let's learn together. I'm starting to get a bit of a feel of it, and I wanted to take you through my 100-metre swim today. As a bit of context, my specialty is 50-metre events. I swam at the World Champs in the 50 freestyle and the 50 butterfly in 2025, but this year I'm focused more on the long distance stuff. I'm swimming the Freshwater Swim Fest 2.5k swim in February 2027, so I'm moving my stroke from more of a sprint style into distance. Now that actually means a lot changes. In sprint training, we tend to press the water down a lot more, we press down before we get into our propulsive a little bit more, whereas in longer distance, we pop the elbow up high and press back quicker. So there is less downward force and more propulsive in distance, more downward and less propulsive in sprint. Alrighty, so this is a 100-metre effort, and you can see here my comment. So I did 12 times 100 on a 140 base. Now I was playing with stroke rate here because I don't really know where I want to have my turnover for this event for 2.5Ks. And you can see here that my stroke rate at 70, I couldn't hold that on the third rep, it was too hard. The 100 that I've chosen here had the biggest propulsive force at 63.59%. Okay, and this is so if we go to the charts, this is my just stroke rate and power charts. This is the first one that pops up. You can see at the top, it's freestyle, 100 meters, 122, and it was long course meters. Taking 32 strokes for both the left and the right, and that stroke rate is kind of confusing. Like I'm doubling that to assume it's about the 60 stroke rate. But let's dive more into the numbers. So if we go to the force field, this is quite a cool snapshot into my stroke. So if we go through the numbers first, your leftward basically means the hand is kind of tilting to the left, rightward to the right. Downward force is from the moment the hand enters the water until you initiate the catch, where you move into propulsive. So all our power in swimming comes from the fingertips to the elbow, and we want to get that paddle pointing the back wall. So when it's doing that, we're into propulsive and we're actually moving forward. The hand drag occurs from the moment the hand enters until we begin the catch. So if the wrist relaxes, the palm kind of tilts up a little bit and you get that frontal drag, okay? And then finally upwards, which is an interesting metric I hadn't ever thought about. At the end of the stroke, if the hand is almost going too deep and pressing towards the surface, you get upward pressure, which is a huge waste of energy. You don't want any upwards, and you actually want 0% of hand drag. What's really interesting in the EO, we can look at the ideal metrics for distance versus sprinter. So for downward, we want between 17 and 22%. So this number here is pretty good. And propulsive is 70 to 75%. So this can be improved. But what I have learned that this is my lap overview. So we're looking at lap 1 here. I prefer to actually delve a little bit more into the strokes because there you can start to see what's happening across the lap. So here we're at the start of lap 1. If I go mid-pack to this stroke here, so this is our right, and these numbers are getting a little bit better. So downward force is to 14%, so actually a little bit less than that 17% recommendation, and propulsive is sitting in the right area. What is quite interesting here, so we're looking at the right hand, the leftward percentage is quite significant. So we want this under 4%. This means when I'm entering with the right hand, I'm kind of curving it a little bit, and I can actually see that on a lot of my videos, and that feels quite natural to me. So I enter and the hand is almost a little bit tilted. So one of the first things I'm seeing in these numbers is I can start to work on straightening that hand and think about bringing that middle finger forward rather than allowing the wrist to tilt. If we go to the next stroke on the left, the propulsive force drops massively. So if you look at stroke 6, we're at 70% propulsive, okay, and the next stroke is only 59. And from my comments, we can actually see that I was breathing every 2 or 4 to the right side, which is my dominant side. When I swim threshold, I only breathe to one side. If I'm swimming easy, I'll breathe bilaterally. So what we can see on that left stroke is essentially I'm not getting as much propulsion maybe after the breath potentially. So this is the breathing arm. Rightward's not too bad considering the breathing arm tends to be the naughty one and things go skew with. Hand drag is relatively minimal. So if we look at propulsive at just under 60%, and it jumps back up to 65 on the next one. So I know straight away looking at the bars down here that I need to be improving how much power I'm getting out of my left arm. And I'm actually suffering from an injury on the right, so looking at these numbers, it is interesting that I am a little bit unbalanced. So when I start to swim, I'm going to really focus on trying to apply more power through the left. So that is a general snapshot. Really cool to see different aspects of the stroke and broken down stroke by stroke or lap by lap. You can also go into lap 2 and see what's happening. So I quite like this chart because consistency, we can see straight away, look at all these random little lines. That means every now and again my hand is doing something funny. What you might find is that it's just the first or the last stroke of each lap as you're breaking out or going into the tumble turn. So if I take away those, immediately I can see my swimming stroke is pretty consistent. But if I'm really wanting to push into the elite level, for example, that first and last stroke still matter. So here, if for example this change in my stroke path is going into the tumble turn, I could potentially be losing time and speed going into that skill. And the tumble turn is not to be underestimated. Apart from the dive, that is where we're going to get the most almost free speed if you do that skill right. So the consistency is just a useful overview at the moment for me to say, okay, like the paths do look relatively similar, but the head-on one, you can see I actually pull slightly deeper on the right side. Again, if we, the longer or the deeper that stroke, the more pressure there is in the water, but also the longer the lever and potentially putting more stress on that shoulder. And I have a shoulder injury on the right side, as I mentioned. So again, that is quite interesting. And looking at this, could the reason my left not being as powerful be because it is not quite as deep? I like the idea of getting deep water because there's more pressure on the palm and things like that. But for distance swimming, maybe it's something I need to change and get away from my lovely deep sprint style depth. Okay, stroke phases. I don't really know this part yet. Just interesting to look at. But here's where it gets very intense. So here's where we're really looking at the stroke. It looks like an ECG chart, which I think is quite funny. I work as a nurse, so I was like, oh, this is interesting. But if we zoom it in, what we're looking at here are my strokes. So if we just look at these two, okay, and let's take away the left stroke. So what we're looking at here is the propulsive force in my right hand. Now what's really interesting, this should just be a normal peak going up and down. So the power, so what's happening here, we're in the recovery, there's no propulsive force, the hand enters, the catch starts, and then the pull. So ideally, oh, what did I just do? Golly, as I said, we're learning. So the hand kind of enters. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the hand enters here and then we start the pull. But this shouldn't be happening. So this is what we call a double peak. When we look at this, it essentially means the path of my hand is changing at some point, even subtly, and I'm getting a micro drop in that power. When I first looked at this chart, I was like, I don't understand because it feels so uniformed. I feel like when I swim, I'm pressing straight back. There's no wiggle, no kind of S shape. This is saying something different. And when I start to add different charts, I can see why. So if we look at lateral, so this lateral line here, the one underneath our baseline, every time it goes above 0, it means we are pressing, the hand is kind of pressing out. When this line goes under, it means the palm presses inwards. Okay, this is really common in a lot of swimmers. Turns out it's common for me too, because what you can see is as I'm entering, so the hand is moving forward here, the power's going up, but look at this moment. This means at some point the hand is slightly tilting inwards, and what happens straight away? There's a huge drop in power. Here, this point underneath the 0 line is the hand slightly coming back to neutral, and the power goes up. So this is really, really interesting, where when I'm trying to figure out where that drop in power is happening, potentially it is from a subtle inward movement of the palm. From doing a bit of reading, this can be super subtle, it doesn't have to be major, but if we have a look, it's super consistent, right? Like I'm doing this almost every right stroke. If we add the left, I mean, you can't say I'm not symmetrical, but this is giving me a lot to work on. So the next time I go to the pool, because data is only good if you can actually use it. There's no point collecting data unless it's going to improve or make an impact in life. This impact means that next time I go to the pool, I'm really going to start to focus on the hand path and trying to figure out if there is a change in inward sweep. I'm going to get my finger paddles back on, a snorkel, so I don't have to think about breathing, and start to feel if I can maintain the pressure through the midpoint of that stroke. So great things to look at, and also back to that top chart for the force field, also trying to get a little bit more power in the left side, because consistently the left is dropping a bit of power. Anyway, I hope that helps, and yeah, EO is pretty cool. Stay tuned for more videos.